This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, and I'm Reverend Emmett Price.
And I'm Reverend Irene Monroe.
Irene, before we head into a conversation on why representation still matters, let's take a moment to thank each and every one of our listeners. Season 2 has been amazing because of your support, your encouragement, your feedback, and your comments. My goodness, you all really liked our conversation on the COVID seasonal blues.
Yeah, we thank you. And you have really been a blessing to us. You've given us encouragement to continue on for a new season in the new year.
We also want to thank our phenomenal producers, Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls. Irene, David E. Talbert's recent Netflix hit, Jingle Jangle, a Christmas journey, has stirred up the conversation on why there aren't more Christmas films in Black. With all of the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially after the vicious murder of George Floyd, the increase of Black Lives Matter yard signs and t-shirts and the like, one would think that the big screen would come along and avail more spaces for Black folks.
Oh, I agree with you, Emmett. Absolutely. You know what? I love the film. I'm telling our audience, if they haven't seen it, please go out and see it. It is unapologetically Black, unabashedly Afrocentric. We see the West African influences. It's a Christmas story through a Black lens here, a portal into a world of magic that in my era, I could have never imagined here. It really reframes what is normal for Black children. And what I remember as a kid, a classic is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And while it is a wonderful story, and we've seen various iterations of it, I could have never imagined myself in it. But this one, oh my God, I was all up and through there. I really, and I traveled. It's so funny because when we think about fantasy, usually these adventure stories were just not afforded to me. And I remember stories that I love, classics like, listen, and watch yourself, Emmett, The Wizard of Oz, a 1930s classic that folks have seen for decades. And I couldn't relate to it. It takes place in Kansas. None of it was relatable, but it was exciting to watch. And what I like about, Jingle Jangle is we're no longer an onlooker, but we're a participant in it. I didn't really begin to appreciate The Wizard of Oz until 1978 when The Wiz came out with Diana Ross and Michael Jackson, before your time, Emmett. But still, nonetheless, it was just a wonderful classic here. So I just like the idea that you can dream and see yourself in a heroic role. That movies really change the experience for a younger generation that just wasn't afforded to me. It allows me to be part of the magic. I think it's revolutionary without being intentionally revolutionary because it normalizes Blackness. What a thought!
What a thought. Now you are funny. I mean, the Wiz, first of all, is my favorite movie of all time. As a musician, that music from the Wiz, I mean, that's Quincy Jones's brilliant work. And so you are so silly
Did you
that it's,
see it? Did you see it?
I listen. I mean, I wasn't there live. I didn't see it live. Did
Yeah,
you?
yeah, yes. Not only did I see it live, but I also saw the film. And what I loved about it, what made it so relatable, is because it took place in Brooklyn, Brownstone.
Oh, see,
I can relate to that.
here you
Okay,
go with that
but
New York thing again.
no, 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 I'm not. But I got. But wait. But I have to say this. I watched the Hallmark Channel. Okay, I really do. There's three of them. The season starts October 24th. I always look forward to it. Runs right through the year. Listen, they got like 400, Christmas stories. Only two Emmett got Black characters. One came out in 2018, and I can't even remember the name of it. Oh, Christmas Everlasting, I think. Oh yeah, Christmas Everlasting. And then one came out this year, was Christmas Come Twice. I'm like, yeah, right. But I have to tell you, the only time I seen a Black Christmas story was what is it? The preacher's wife with Whitney Houston.
Well, that was a good one though. I mean, but let me get back to Jingle Jangle. because
All
I mean
right.
this was phenomenal. I thought you had Forrest Whitaker, Keegan Michael Key,
Mm-hmm.
Felicia Rashad was back, music by John Legend, and this, as you mentioned, was unapologetically black. It was in your face, and I loved it. It was captivating. It was just dynamic. I mean, everything about it was absolutely phenomenal. So, listeners, if you haven't seen Jingle Jangle yet, go on Netflix and go on and
Mm-hmm.
pull it up and let's support this production. It's a phenomenal production.
I think, but you know what though? I think it will have the kind of, audience participation that I think it is as phenomenal as Black Panther. I really do because when have we seen an all black Christmas production?
Well, hmm.
Really? I mean, listen, there's a movie like Black Nativity. I just watched the other day. It was what the best man holiday. But really, we don't have a body of work that we can say to kids, look, here you can choose from a whole menu of stuff.
Well, I mean, there are movies that were filmed that around the Christmas season. I mean,
This Christmas, what Chris? What was this? Chris Brown?
yeah, I mean, you got that. I mean, you can go back to, even Friday After Next, which was in the season. There are a number of movies that are in the season, but I guess you're right that they were not necessarily Christmas movies per se. But you mentioned something that I want to go back to because you talked about being a child, and clearly I wasn't there.
Watch yourself.
What were you watching? What were you watching on television, particularly around cartoons, when young Irene Monroe got time to sit in front of the television?
Okay, now since you ask, okay, it was a dearth of really just a representation. So let me just tell you what I watched. Not even cartoons, but just shows. Okay, I grew up with Little Rascals, Buckwheat, and I didn't realize how silly it was until Eddie Murphy did an SNL skit of it. I tell you what tormented me as a child growing up. See, now this is way before your time. It really was. Shirley Temple and Bojangles, Bill Robinson, and that stair dance. Okay, I mean it was just really crazy. I grew up. I remember. Listen, the first time I really got to appreciate a cartoon was 1971. Jackson 5 cartoon, Saturday morning. This was a series from 1971 to 72. Then in 72 also Bill Cosby's Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids came, and they came in 72, and then played again in 85, because by that time his show was a hit in 84, the Cosby Show. But let me tell you what was upsetting. So I grew up with Charlie Brown Christmas. They decided in 1973 to do Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. And by that time, separate and equal was stricken from the book. Jim Crow America was supposed to be gone. But Franklin, who was supposed to integrate the peanut gallery, sat on his side of the table. And this was before COVID, where you had to do social distancing.
Well, I mean, I remember Franklin. I mean, literally everybody else was on the other side of the table, even at the head of the tables, rubbing elbows, and Franklin was by himself. I mean, what does
Mhm.
that say? And you mentioned Little Rascals, which actually I grew up on, and whereas you mentioned Buckwheat, Stymie was my cat. I mean,
Oh, you like, oh, really?
Stymie was the dude. And then the Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids,
They
you
always
know,
had bad hair days.
remember the cartoon within the cartoon though, right? The Brown Hornet. I mean, as all the kids would watch around the TV watching that. I remember though, and this is a paid homage to you in New York. There was a cartoon about the Harlem Globetrotters,
That's right.
and
Oh,
they had
okay.
their own cartoon, and then they would also make appearances on Scooby Doo and some of the other cartoons of the day. And of course, the Jackson Five was,
Mm.
just, I mean,
Oh, that was the
that
day.
was it.
That was the
That-
day. Thought I had died and absolutely went to heaven. Oh my goodness. And then Bill Cosby came. And listen, by that time, also Soul Train 73. I will always remember that. I see my steps now. Okay, I'm doing it now. Okay, really. So, where most people wanted to go to Hollywood and make it big, I wanted to go Chicago because I had wanted to be one of the dancers. So, I mean, and Soul Train was so revolutionary because I grew up with American Bandstand with Dick Clark. And so I really felt that there was a change now that you begin to see more black representation, but only sporadically, not consistently. And I'm hoping that with Jingle Jangle, we will begin to see more consistently as you open up the show today with this inflection point that now with Black Lives Matter, with George Floyd being an inflection point, that we will understand clearly that black presentation is important too for our kids and even for us older folks. I mean, listen, really.
I mean, one of the things that I'm wrestling with, though, and maybe there are some listeners out here who are along the same, bandwidth. I'm not so sure the inflection point was a real inflection point. I mean, as we look at where we are now, a number of months, past that May 25th date, and you had all of the corporate statements, and you had all of the, you know, um, symbolic gestures. The murders haven't stopped.
No.
The discrimination has not stopped. The prejudice has not stopped. And as we just mentioned, we still don't have representation in media, whether in cartoons or in films.
Right,
And so
right.
it's like, what gives? Are we what are we hoping for? What are we dreaming for?
Well, I think it depends. We have representation without transformation. I mean that's just how I see that. I mean, it really. I remember. Well, we remember a couple of years ago, maybe five, wasn't it? Oscar is so white. There was a whole big argument about that. I mean, and what we see with animation, and I'm really concerned about kids because again, what makes Jingle Jangle so wonderful is that I didn't have that. You know what I mean? And if I were raising you as my child, you wouldn't have had it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it's like, a future generation can imagine themselves in ways in which we couldn't. I mean, you have to see it in many ways to really believe you can be that. And what bothers me about with cartoons, because that tends to be a children's first entryway into media, access to media. You sit down and watch it, and I think what bothers me is that what we're seeing, and we've talked about this, Emmett, that while we will hear black voiceovers in cartoons, a lot of times they're transformed into animals. So we will hear black voices and we know it, like whether it's an Eddie Murphy or a Will Smith, but we will not actually see a black person in a cartoon. And I mean, the classic was Princess and the Frog, which I absolutely love. That came out in 2009. And 30 minutes into the film, okay, she transformed into a frog and took 43 minutes after that for her to come back and be a whole person.
Well, one of the things that makes Jingle Jangle so phenomenal is the uplifting message, but also the way that folks are uplifted in their presence, in their
Mm-hmm.
embodiment.
Mm-hmm.
These black folks are black, and they're not, a distortion of blackness by
No.
someone who wants to project some kind of stereotype or some kind of, diminutive aspect of blackness. And so, the challenge that we have here is that when we do have black films and black cartoons, do we really support them? And that's why I want to encourage folks, if you are akin to supporting black lives, then here is a film that we can support. Here there are some folks who are doing some phenomenal work, that we should look for and look towards and really support them, because that's where the rubber hits the road. It's one thing to talk a good talk, but you have to walk in those shoes
Yeah.
and actually put your dollars where your
Right.
mouth was.
And it's show business. So if more people show an interest in it, then there'll be more productions like that within that genre, cartoons. Because again, that tends to be this whole notion that, it's universal. Every child can see his or herself in it. And that's not true in this new era, not only about Black Lives Matter, but in terms of LGBTQ. So I'm hoping that, we, like you said, we will put some dollars towards that.
Yeah, we have to envision the world that we want to see. And
Mm.
as we envision it, we need to walk as if we are part of that vision so that we can, as the old saying goes, be the change that we want to see. You are listening to the All Rev'd Up podcast. We'll be right back.
How you doing, Chadwick? I just wanted to thank you for making Black Panther for the kids. Representation is very important. It gives the kids like hope, and it gives them the confidence.
Shalewa Sharp,
Oh no.
you
Hello.
should work in show business. That was
Well, you just heard Shalewa Sharp, who was actually talking to a poster of the Black Panther in a 2018 Jimmy Fallon show surprise. As she's talking to the poster, Chadwick Boseman actually comes from behind the poster and they have a couple of words of engagement. This is so beautiful as she talks about the real importance of representation, particularly for young folks. Irene, we were talking about cartoons earlier, and I am just remembering now, my sons are teenagers and they used to watch the PJs, the Proud Family. There was Aaron Magruder's Boondocks.
Oh.
There was Little Bill. Of course, Doc McStuffins. And there was actually a cartoon called Class of 3000, which was done by Andre 3000, which was something else to watch. And then there was Static Shock. There was Black Dynamite, of course, the Cleveland Show. And then there was this cartoon called Craig of the Creek, where Craig's mother actually went to a HBCU, a historically Black college university, and used to wear the HU sweater even in the show. So there have been a number of recent or more recent cartoons that have representation.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. And the thing is that once there was a dearth of Black cartoonists, and we're now seeing, so many of them just rising up, and it really, I began to see it in the 1990s. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that I love about, about seeing cartoons, I mean, not only is it an adventure, but it brings joy and escapism in a way that in which, again, I think children need to think of a world beyond the one in which they live in, and see themselves being mirrored in those segments and in those cartoons. So I just love what I'm seeing because, like I said, now, I grew up with Archie. Okay. I mean, I didn't see any, I didn't see me. I didn't even see myself in Romper Room. See, now that really, so I'm just delighted that a younger generation, and it really starts really in the 1990s, you know, seeing Black cartoonists. And that's the thing. Kids who, a lot of kids when they're young, and maybe you were one of those kids too. And I see it a lot with little boys. They like drawing cartoons.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
if you don't see yourself in those cartoons, you can't imagine doing it as for a living. And so that is just what we're seeing now, that is just so wonderful. I mean, again, we didn't have Black playwrights, and so seeing Shonda Rhimes, I grew up again, just with Spike Lee. And I'm not castigating that, because that was wonderful and his work is phenomenal. But since him, oh my goodness, I mean, Issa Rae, I mean,
Mhm.
it's just one person after another.
No, you're exactly right. And I'm just so grateful for those who paved the way and who really took a lot of scrutiny. I mean, now you mentioned so many names, but these folks took so much scrutiny in those early days. Spike Lee, I mean, Spike Lee was being raked across the coals for a
And
number of the,
Singleton, your boy from
yep,
LA. Oh,
Jonathan
absolutely.
Singleton.
And then the work is just, demonized, because it's like, well, that's not art, because people are not used to seeing it. What we call the larger dominant society is not used to seeing it. The question it brings for me, Emmett, is like, one of the things I've noticed about Black films when we're not doing it, you got to begin to realize that those films are not made for us, because a lot of times the films like 12 Years a Slave, and listen, it's a phenomenal book. I mean, a book and film. Detroit.
What about your favorite, The Help?
Oh, okay, you see? Okay, see now you see, okay, don't get me now, lose my religion. Okay. But the point about that is that, it's like you see Black pain and suffering on the silver screen. And it's like, well, it bothers me on many levels. We go to the theater for the same reason white people go, which is escapism and to be entertained. We live a Black hard life. We can't even be assured after seeing Black suffering on the screen that when we get into our cars, we will even make it home. So I'm very glad when I see Jingle Jangle. It's like, yeah, just for a moment, I can suspend and be someplace else. And listen, it's good therapy. It's just wonderful therapy.
Well, it's good therapy, and it's also, I mean, you made such a good point right here, and I just want to underscore it, because many of our young people are watching cartoons now on phones and tablets, right? So the television is not the same instrument that it was for you or for me back in our day. And if you think about it this way, the same piece of equipment that they watch these cartoons on are the same pieces of equipment that they're seeing the maimed and tortured and lynched bodies of Black folks. It's the same equipment. And
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
need to have some uplifting programming so that our young kids don't see themselves in the vicious, horrific imagery, but in the futuristic and the exploratory, the inquisitive, piece. So our young people should have the opportunity to imagine a world that doesn't currently exist. And some of these shows actually do that. And back to Jingle Jangle, I think Jingle Jangle does that very well. It gives us what I would call an Afrofuturistic,
Right.
spectrum in
Right.
terms of what it means to live in an embodied experience of Black culture, but to also think beyond the current notion of it.
And don't distort it. So like so I don't want anyone to think that I don't like animation, because I did like The Lion King that came out in 1994. But then you have something like Spies in Disguise, and there's Will Smith, and he's like this blue blob or something that I can't even make sense of. And then in November, Soul came out. Did you see that
Yeah, I did.
on Pixar? I figured you would, because right, it's about a jazz musician and a band teacher, and he's like a ghost. Like, no, he's the ghost blue blob. I can't get with it. So again, I just can't. But he's the blue blob, shaped creature, and it's scary. It really is. And the thing that gets me, it distorts the music. It distorts really the real essence about what jazz music is about. The jazz musicians, the kind of discipline that they really employ to really bring their art out in the public. So I just hope that more of us will definitely enter these fields that when I was growing up, it just wasn't even a possibility. I mean, I think about it, like, who would think to be what? I mean, I couldn't think about being a playwright. I couldn't even think about being an actress unless I'm going to be a mammy or be like, Hattie McDaniels,
Daniel.
who played a maid, but said this when she won the Oscar: "I'd rather play a maid than be a maid." And and then there was Octavia Spencer, who wins an Oscar for playing a maid.
Well, I'm going to put the maids aside, and I'm going to invoke, since we started this segment with Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther is a highlight and a a possibility. We need more Black Panthers. I mean, we need more movies that depict, the brilliance of Blackness, and that also take us back to the African continent to show how brilliant our ancestors were. And, in addition to Black Panther, I was a huge fan of Luke Cage, 2016 Netflix. It only did 2 seasons. I don't know what happened. And so my encouragement to our listeners is, if you are feeling what we're saying, if you are down for the cause, then when you see a show that depicts the brilliance, the beauty, right, the bronze, right, the courage, the boldness,
the genius
in Black, please support it. Please support it. Okay, let me get off my milk crate right now. Irene, I know you have something to say.
I do. I have it's a benediction, but it's also a prayer. We're in the holiday season. A lot of people will let down their guard. I know that we have pandemic fatigue. And so this is just a prayer, really, for you to remember not only staying safe for yourself, but for one another. Because we will get on the other side of this. So in this holiday season, during a pandemic where social distancing will not allow us to be with each other, may we who are inconvenienced remember those who are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember those most vulnerable. May those who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making their rent. May those who have the flexibility to care for their children when school is closed remember those who have no option. May we who have to cancel a trip remember those who have no safe place to go. And may those who settle for quarantine at home remember those who have no home. As fear grips our country, let us choose love during this time when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other. Let us find ways to be loving and embrace one another. And when this pandemic is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake from a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, the taste of Holy Communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with friends, the stadium roaring, each deep breath, and a boring day in life itself. When this pandemic ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we want to be, we are called to be, and we hope to be. Until then, keep your distance, wash your hands, and wear your mask. Ashe, and amen.
Amen.
All Rev'd Up is brought to you by us, the Revs. Our amazing producers are Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls.
Music for this episode is brought to you by Reverend Price's son, musical prodigy Emmett G. Price IV. All Rev'd Up is distributed by GBH.
Additional thanks to Bob Kempf, Nina Perzuki, Chelsea Mers, Meredith Neerman, and Zach Waldman.
If you like what you hear, let us know. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts and follow us at All Rev'd Up Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
Feel free to send us a note, a question, or a comment to allrev'duppod@gmail.com. We'll be back with another episode of All Rev'd Up.